Hi, you're watching Libertas Press YouTube channel. I'm Kirby Harris. Here we're reporting the truth and common sense opinion. Today is the news segment for today, and it is for November 29th, 2017. Again, you're watching Libertas Press News channel, and we're going to go ahead and go to the stories now. Let us see. The big story today, everyone was talking about NBC. Matt Lauer is in a sex scandal type of thing. They came on this morning, and Savannah Guthrie, basically with Huda, I think her name is, they were on there and they were talking about how that they had fired Matt Lauer because of a complaint. And the first thing I thought of was, did they just fire him because of a complaint, or is there any proof? Did he admit to it? And then, of course, the women both talked about how much they loved him as a friend and he was great, but then they also believed the lady. But, you don't believe your friend. I mean, maybe they knew something we didn't know, but they weren't allowed to tell. Who knows? So NBC receives 2 more complaints about Matt Lauer. Also, so that might have added to it, or maybe they knew that ahead of time. But also Variety, a friend of mine had told me that they had planned on publishing this. Well, they had been working on this story for 2 months, and when NBC got out in front of the story, I guess maybe they heard about the story, so maybe it wasn't just they wanted to get rid of a sexual harasser. They just were like, oh, this is bad, so they went ahead and fired him. And then the Variety story came out today. Most referenced, it says, I'll bet. So I actually read that. I'll read a little bit of that. It's kind of long, so I won't read the whole thing. Matt Lauer's ouster creates problem for NBC leadership and future of Today Show. That's in USA Today. Matt Lauer allegedly sexually harassed staffer during Olympics. Highly cited, page 6. The ghost of Matt Lauer. Okay. Featured in the Atlantic. And NBC credibility questioned following Lauer's firing, Fox News, and all of these stories, of course, the ones I don't read to you, or if I don't read the whole thing, you can go and read them yourself, because I do put a link down in the description, so you can do that. Let's see, moving on down. Senate votes to proceed to debate as tax overhaul gains steam. That's New York Times. If you pay no taxes, you will end up with more money under the GOP tax plan, ? That's a fact checked by PolitiFact, or as I like to call them, PolitiFake, because I don't believe you can really trust them, even though sometimes I've read what they've said and I've believed it. Other times, not so much. Senate GOP votes to begin debate on tax bill, the Hill. What comes after the tax bill? You already know. Esquire.com. No serious lawmaker should support this tax bill, Washington Post. Now, if this was the Washington Times or a conservative or libertarian magazine, and I'm going to try to start adding some of these stories from them, but this is the quickest, easiest way to get this done, and it does pretty much cover everything, but I would like to vary the opinions in the future. But anyway, that from the Washington Post is probably biased. President Trump says wrongly that he won't benefit from the Republican tax bill. A lot of people think he will financially benefit, even though he's supposedly divested himself, which to me is smoke and mirrors. But anyway, let's see. Trump veers past guardrails, feeling impervious to the uproar he causes. That's from the Washington Post. And I kind of agree with him there. Trump just he doesn't care. He doesn't care what he does. He does all sorts of stuff that he has to know is going to cause an uproar. And some of it's pretty cool. Some of it's messed up. Like what he did in these stories. Related coverage, did a Muslim migrant beat up a Dutch boy on crutches? Fact check, Snopes. I like to call them nopes because you can't always believe them either. Trump strays into hot water with latest tweets. Donald Trump is tweeting videos by Britain first. I guess that's like a white supremacist or an anti-Muslim group. No, an anti-Muslim group, I believe. Esquire.co.uk. Donald Trump attacks British PM Theresa May over her criticism of his far-right retweets. Let's see. CNN exclusive, Jared Kushner met with special counsel about Flynn. CNN related coverage. Mueller probes Flynn's role and alleged plan to deliver cleric to Turkey, highly cited in the Wall Street Journal. Jared Kushner interviewed by special counsel's office, CBS News. Special counsel delays grand jury testimony amid signs of Flynn's deals, where he talks, highly cited CNN. Mueller investigation, what Flynn's flip-flop on Turkey tells us, Newsweek. Excuse me. This time of year, frogs in my throat there. Let's see. House Democrats division erupt as sexual harassment issue heats up, threatens members, USA Today. House votes to mandate sexual harassment training for members and staff. The Hill. Now, that could be a good thing or a bad thing. It depends on if it's like, BS type sexual harassment training or legit, because a lot of times a lot of weird stuff gets in there about what rape is, the definition, this, that, the other, all sorts of weird stuff. But anyway, from the Hill, Congress must do right by victims of harassment, opinion, Washington Post. And then finally, launch of new missile increases pressure on U.S. policymakers to confront North Korea threat, Washington Post. Haley, North Korea, I guess that's Nikki Haley. North Korea has brought the world closer to war. The case for talks with North Korea, opinion, Bloomberg. All right. Let me get to the first story. NBC receives at least 2 new complaints about Matt Lauer. Let's see. Fast-moving national reckoning over sexual harassment in the workplace toppled another television news star on Wednesday when NBC fired Matt Lauer, the co-host of its most profitable franchise today. Definitely is not MSNBC. After an allegation of inappropriate sexual behavior with a subordinate. The downfall of Mr. Lauer, a presence in American living rooms for more than 20 years, adds to a head-spinning string of prominent firings over sexual harassment and abuse allegations. NBC News said it had decided to dismiss its star morning anchor after a woman met with new network executives on Monday to describe her interactions with him. While it is the first complaint about this behavior in over 20 years he's been at NBC News, we're also presented with reason to believe this may have not been an isolated incident, Andrew Lack, the NBC News chairman, wrote in a memo to staff. On Wednesday, NBC received at least 2 more complaints related to Mr. Lauer, according to a person briefed on the network's handling of the matter. One complaint came from a former employee who said Mr. Lauer had summoned her to his office in 2001, locked the door, and sexually assaulted her. She provided her account to the New York Times, but declined to let her name be used. She told the Times that she passed out and had to be taken to a nurse. She said that she felt helpless because she didn't want to lose her job and that she didn't report the encounter at the time because she felt ashamed. Representatives for Mr. Lauer did not respond to multiple requests for comment. News of Mr. Lauer's sudden downfall shook the television world, where he had established himself as one of the most powerful men in his industry. Even President Trump, who himself has denied multiple allegations of sexual misconduct, I think Trump has 12 allegations against him, weighed in, seizing on Mr. Lauer's firing to denounce NBC's news coverage and call for other senior figures at NBC News to be ousted. Trump's such a joke. Anyway, Mr. Lauer, 59, joins an ignominious group of media figures felled by the recent spate of harassment claims, including the studio mogul Harvey Weinstein, who's a liberal, the comedian Louis C.K., not sure about him, CBS host Charlie Rose, who's a liberal, and political journalist Mark Halperin. Not sure about him. Journalists at several news outlets had recently conducted interviews with former and current NBC employees about Mr. Lauer's behavior, alerting the network to potential articles about him. But it was a formal complaint on Monday that prompted NBC to take action. In an editorial meeting on Wednesday, Mr. Lack said that Mr. Lauer's involvement with the woman who made the complaint began while they were in Sochi, Russia, to cover the Winter Olympics in 2014, and that their involvement continued after they returned to New York, according to two people briefed on the meeting. Some people wonder if it's not, it wasn't consensual, and then he broke it off maybe because his wife, was apparently continually trying to make sure he didn't fool around, and so maybe now she's saying it was unwanted, but who knows? This idea popped in my head there. And what's funny is a lot of this stuff that's coming out now, the National Enquirer of all magazines have reported a lot of this stuff, and it was considered nonsense, hearsay, and stupid, and now it's all coming out in the regular papers. So it's kind of funny. It reminds me of the movie Men in Black, when he says, well, I'll read up on what's going on with the aliens, and he grabs a National Enquirer or something like that. Anyway, in an editorial meeting on Wednesday, Mr. Lack, let's see, I read that. Other Today hosts learned of Mr. Lauer's termination around 4 a.m. on Wednesday. Staff members were told just minutes before the show went on the air at 7 a.m. Savannah Guthrie, Mr. Lauer's co-anchor, was visibly shaken when she delivered the news to viewers, describing Mr. Lauer as a dear, dear friend, and adding that she was heartbroken for the brave colleague who came forward to tell her story. But the question is, if he's such a dear, dear friend, doesn't she believe him when it's just an accusation? See, this is the kind of stuff I have trouble with, where, it's almost like they're trying to balance, well, I've got to support the woman no matter what. Well, no, not if she's lying. We got to always trust the woman. No, she could be lying. She could be telling the truth. She could be lying. This could have been consensual. This could have, and then gone wrong. A lot of times people in relationships, they'll sit there and say it's not consensual, or they'll break the anonymity of the relationship when the other person says I can't do it anymore, or turns them down, or whatever. Some people will even be accused of stuff who are found later to be innocent, who were where the person came on to them and they rebuffed their advance, and then they went out and told them that they had done it to them or raped them or something like that. So, it's just kind of weird that this is a good friend of hers, someone she's really close with, but she automatically assumes he did it. I mean, maybe there's something she knew and was told, or maybe she knew about it already, and she's covering. I don't know. Who knows? I don't want to try to judge people's. I just want to say possibilities. I don't want to necessarily judge their motives. Let's see. Soon after announcing the dismissal, Mrs. Guthrie gripped the hands of Hoda Khattab, who was rushed in as an emergency substitute host. The network did not name a replacement for Mr. Lauer. Ari Wickenfield, a civil rights lawyer with the firm Wickenfield, Herendeen, and Atkinson in Washington, said on Wednesday that he represented the woman who had made the initial complaint to NBC, but declined to identify her in a statement provided to the Times. He praised the courage of his client and said, "My client and I met with representatives from NBC's Human Resources and Legal Departments at 6 p.m. on Monday for an interview that lasted several hours. Our impression at this point is that NBC acted quickly, as all companies should, when confronted with credible allegations of sexual misconduct in the workplace." Well, see, I kind of disagree with that, because, I mean, unless they had proof or Lauer admitted to it, I would say you just don't fire someone unless you're trying to cover your butt. You're trying to stop what you see as maybe major financial losses if you keep them on, or if it's found out later to be true. Well, you covered for it, or you allowed him to work, and blah, blah, blah. It's just, here's what I don't understand. Does Lauer know who this woman is who's accusing him? I mean, does he even know any of this? I guess we don't necessarily have to know, but I know this isn't a court of law yet, but he's got lawyers, so doesn't he have the right to face his accusers? The Constitution says he does. I mean, and I'm not a fan of Lauer, so don't try to pull that. Let me see. The woman met with reporters from the Times on Monday, but said she was not ready to discuss it publicly. Well, apparently you are. not trying to attack this woman. If she was definitely a victim, then I'm all for her and against him. But we don't know yet if it's true or not. Besides his Today perch, Mr. Lauer was a genial co-host of events like the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade and the Winter and Summer Olympics, and he conducted countless interviews with celebrities. He also contributed to NBC's news political coverage, although he was widely panned after a debate last year in which he appeared to go easy on Mr. Trump while asking aggressive questions of Hillary Clinton. The Today Show caters to and relies on an overwhelmingly female audience, and Mr. Lauer, see, that could be one of the motives for the firing, if there's no proof. And there could be proof. I'm not saying there's not. And Mr. Lauer is part of a cast that presents itself as a tight-knit family. Behind the scenes, however, the on-set environment could sometimes resemble a boys' club, particularly in the years before Comcast completed its acquisition of NBC Universal in 2013, according to interviews with more than half a dozen former staff members. Jokes about women's appearances were routine, the former employee said. One former producer recalled a director saying he wanted some milk in reference to one woman's chest and making inappropriate comments about women over an audio feed with multiple people listening. Two former employees recalled colleagues playing a crude game in which they chose which female guests or staff members they would prefer to marry, kill, or have sex with. The former employees spoke anonymously because they feared their career prospects and the industry could be harmed. See, almost everything about this story is anonymous, and I don't like that. Anonymous source, anonymous this. I know sometimes you need to have it, and the anonymous sources are real, but how do we know? How do we know this went on? Our current and former staff members, however, described a more professional work culture and said they did not witness harassment. And NBC, another side of the story, an NBC spokeswoman declined on Wednesday to comment on the boys' club characterization, but pointed out that 13 of 19 senior-level female producers at Today had been promoted since 2015. The woman who described the encounter in 2001 with Mr. Lauer in his office told the Times that the anchor had made inappropriate comments to her shortly after she started as a Today producer in the late 1990s. While traveling with Mr. Lauer for a story, she said he asked her inappropriate questions over dinner, like whether she had ever cheated on her husband. On the way to the airport, she said Mr. Lauer sat uncomfortably close to her in the car. She recalled that when she moved away, he said, "You're no fun." 2001, the woman said Mr. Lauer, who's married, asked her to his office to discuss a story during a workday. When she sat down, she said he locked the door, which he could do by pressing a button while sitting at his desk. People who worked at NBC said the button was a regular security measure installed for high-profile employees. The woman said Mr. Lauer asked her to unbutton her blouse, which she did. She said the anchor then stepped out from behind his desk, pulled down his pants, bent over a chair, and had intercourse with her. Whoa. I never read this part in the other story I talked about. At some point, she said she passed out with her pants pulled halfway down. She woke up on the floor of his office, and Mr. Lauer had his assistant take her to a nurse. Now, there's two views on this. One view could be that it was consensual. She could have said, no, my career's not worth this, and left. The other view is, he's in a position of power over her, and she feared never being able to work again. I would say, hey, the job's not as important as not doing something like this. So she has a choice. So, there's two ways to look at it. The woman told the Times that Mr. Lauer never made an advance toward her again and never mentioned what occurred in his office. She said she did not report the episode to NBC at the time because she believes she would have done more because she believes she should have done more to stop Mr. Lauer. She left the network about a year later. All right, and you can read the rest of that. A lot there. And then here's basically the Variety article that I mentioned. A lot of what was in the other article was there, so I'm not going to read this, but basically Matt Lauer accused of sexual harassment by multiple women, exclusive. This supposedly is the story that NBC found out about that was going to be coming out eventually, and they decided to cut it off now, be proactive for whatever their reasons are, whether that's to stop harassment or whether that's because they have a large female audience and they don't want to lose and go out of business or lose views or whatever. But But anyway, it says, as the co-host of NBC's Today, Matt Lauer once gave a colleague a sex toy as a present. It included an explicit note about how he wanted to use it on her, which left her mortified. On another day, he summoned a different female employee to his office and then dropped his pants, showing her his penis. After an employee declined to do anything, visibly shaken, he reprimanded her for not engaging in a sexual act. He would sometimes quiz female producers about who they'd slept with, offering to trade names, and he loved to engage in a crass quiz game, which I've read about, who you would F, marry, or kill, in which he would identify the female co-host he'd most like to sleep with. These accounts of Lauer's behavior at NBC are the result of a 2-month investigation by Variety with dozens of interviews with current and former staffers. Variety has talked to 3 women who identified themselves as victims of sexual harassment by Lauer, and their stories have been corroborated by friends or colleagues that they told at the time. They have asked now to remain unnamed, fearing professional repercussions. Well, their names have to come out, because if this is going to trial, unless they don't want trial, you got to know who your accusers are. I mean, unless they settle this out of court. But Matt Lauer still, I think even in that case, has to know who they are. Because if there's a lot of these women, he might not know who they are. On Wednesday, NBC announced that Lauer was fired from Today. It was a stunning move for a co-host who was widely considered the crown jewel of the network's news division with a $25 million annual salary. Cause of his dismissal, according to sources, was a detailed complaint from another current NBC employee about inappropriate sexual conduct from Lauer that started on a trip at the Sochi Olympics in 2014 and continued for several months. I said I wasn't going to read this, but this is pretty interesting. The employee met with Human Resources at NBC on Monday night. Let's see. Several women told Variety, skipping over a little bit of stuff, told Variety that they complained to executives at the network about Lauer's behavior, which fell on deaf ears given the lucrative advertising surrounding Today. NBC decided to comment. For most of Lauer's tenure at Today, the morning news show was #1 in the ratings, and executives are eager to keep him happy. It's not clear if NBC is paying Lauer through the end of his contract, which expires in 2018. Lauer cannot be reached for comment. Insiders say that NBC was forced to act quickly after this week's complaint, given the severity of the accusations and the national dialogue around sexual harassment that has ended the careers of Harvey Weinstein, Charlie Rose, Kevin Spacey, Louis C.K., and other prominent men. Now, against a series of questions about the future of Today, a troubling portrait has emerged of Lauer. In front of the camera for more than 2 decades, Lauer has positioned himself as America's squeaky clean dad. But behind the scenes, Lauer was a different person. Despite being married, Lauer was fixated on women, especially their bodies and looks, according to more than 10 accounts from current and former employees. He was known for making lewd comments verbally or over text messages. He once made a suggestive reference to a colleague's performance in bed and compared it to how she was able to complete her job, according to witnesses to the exchange. For Lauer, work and sex were intertwined. And I'll read this last part. There were a lot of consensual relationships, but that's still a problem because of the power he held. That's the other thing I was saying. Says a former producer who knew firsthand of these encounters. He couldn't sleep around town with celebrities or on the road with random people because he's Matt Lauer and he's married. So he'd have to do it within his stable where he exerted power, and he knew people wouldn't ever complain. Wow, it's pretty wild there.
Almost everything, so we know how to cover
okay, got some audio, extra audio there, some of these websites. Let's see, PolitiFact. The story is, if you pay no taxes, will you end up with more money under the GOP tax plan? Let's see, will the Republicans' tax proposal be a boon for Americans who currently don't earn enough to pay taxes? Senator Tim Scott, Republican, South Carolina, says yes. Days before the Senate was slated to take up the bill, Scott was interviewed by Martha Raddatz on ABC's This Week. Here's a portion of their exchange about the state legislation. Raddatz, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. About 45% of Americans don't pay income tax, and many of those are the working poor. So how does this help them? Well, if you don't pay income taxes and we increase your refund by 40%, that is a direct dollar impact. In other words, you'll have more money to use keep those ends together. Those single mothers like mine who are working paycheck to paycheck, they will now not get a $9,300 deduction, $9,300. They will now not get a to streamline the wording. We decided to fact check this overall point that a typical family not currently paying income taxes would receive more money under the overhaul. His office did not object to that paraphrase. Now, here's the problem with what Scott just said. He's supposed to be a conservative, and basically they say they pay no taxes, but they get a refund. How do you get a refund if you don't pay? That's welfare. People are already getting money that they don't pay. Now, some would argue, hey, I'm going to take that money because I don't believe, because of all the fraud and how they waste the money, they take more than they should. They've taken it from me for all my life, from my parents, from my grandparents. So I'm just going to get some of it back. That's how a lot of people justify getting something when they pay nothing, and they're getting more back than they pay in. But it's welfare. It's just point blank welfare. So anyway, PolitiFact goes on, these people will not be getting an increased refund of 40% or a $9,300 deduction. Even though Scott said that, those changes would not improve the position of the people who already do not pay income taxes. Scott's office said those points referred to an earlier discussion in the interview. The 40% figure refers to early estimates by the Republican staff of the Senate Finance Committee about how Americans with specific income and family structures would gain from passage of the bill. More recent projections are here, and there's a link that you could go to in the description below. As far as for the $9,300 deduction, that's roughly the amount the Senate bill would increase this current standard deduction for single heads of household. Let's see. Again, those don't apply here, even though they were in Scott's claim. So we wondered how it would be possible for Americans who already don't pay income taxes to see money from the proposed tax overhaul. The individual mandate. If a household already was paying taxes, having more money in their pocket would require either getting more money back from the government through the tax process or arguing that the economic growth spurred by the tax bill would inevitably generate rises for workers in that household. However, the GOP tax bills do not expand the earned income tax credit, which is a refundable credit designed to put more money in the pockets of the working poor. Welfare. Like I said, it's welfare. If anything, the bills use of a slower growing inflation measure called change, CPI, would make EITC refunds less valuable over time, and another refundable tax credit, the child tax credit, would see tighter eligibility rules for the refund portion, which would result in some households losing that portion of the credit. They've already reduced the amounts, so for the child tax credits, I know that for a fact. Let's see. Meanwhile, even those who argue that the bill's corporate and income tax cuts will spur economic growth can't guarantee that any particular American will receive a raise. As it turns out, Scott's office offered a different justification, one involving the proposal in the Senate bill to rescind the individual mandate for purchasing health insurance. That provision of the Affordable Care Act requires that Americans who don't have health insurance pay tax penalty, which of course is unconstitutional no matter what turncoat John Roberts says as the head of the Supreme Court. By repealing the individual mandate, a tax paid overwhelmingly by the middle and working classes, the Senate bill removes a burden placed on low-income families, said Michelle Exner, the spokeswoman for Scott. The individual mandate penalty does fall disproportionately on lower and moderate income households, and lower and moderate income households are also likeliest to owe no federal income taxes. Here's how Scott's example of a family saving money from that tax bill would work. Say you're a family that did not earn enough to face a tax burden. Currently, you'd have a choice regarding health coverage. Either pay for insurance at roughly $2,500 a year, which most of them can't afford, after subsidies for a typical Affordable Care Act plan, or forgo insurance and pay the penalty. This year, the penalty is either 2.5% of income or $695 per adult and $347.50 per child, up to a family maximum of $2,085, whichever is higher. The individual mandate is rescinded, which it should be. I'm adding that part. his family would have a different choice: either keep paying for insurance or drop their insurance and save whatever their individual mandate penalty would have been. It goes on to say what they think could happen, what an independent analysis shows, and their ruling. That's the part I want to get to. Scott said, if you don't pay income taxes, you'll have more money under the Republican tax plan. Scott's logic rests on Americans who do not pay income taxes no longer having to pay the penalty for not carrying health insurance. However, people who decided to keep buying health insurance despite the lifting of the individual mandate penalty wouldn't benefit under Scott's scenario. And if they decide to forgo health insurance and pocket the amount of the individual mandate penalty instead, they would only end up ahead if they remained healthy enough to keep their medical costs low. So they consider it false. But see, here's where this is. One, they're biased. They're liberal, this PolitiFact. Two, the reason this isn't false is because you've got to pay. You either got to pay for insurance, which is, what's the amounts it had here? You got to pay for insurance, which is $2,500, roughly $2,500 a year. You could possibly get subsidies, or you could pay less. But basically, if you don't pay the $2,500 a year, then you basically got to pay a $695 fine for each adult and $347.50 for each child, and a maximum of basically almost what the insurance would cost for probably one person. So basically, if you don't have to pay the mandate, then you're getting you're keeping $695 per adult and $347 per child, $2,085 per family. And if you forego insurance, then you keep all that money. You're not taking that money you saved and then paying it out, or part of that money you saved and paying it out. So this is just nonsense, like I thought. Let's see. Trump veers past guardrails, feeling impervious to the uproars he causes. President Trump this week disseminated on social media 3 inflammatory and unverified anti-Muslim videos, took glee in the firing of a news anchor for sexual harassment allegations, despite facing more than a dozen of his own accusers, and used a ceremony honoring Navajo war heroes to malign a senator with a derogatory nickname Pocahontas. Again and again, Trump veered far past the guardrails of presidential behavior, but despite the now routine condemnations, the president is acting emboldened as if he were impervious to the uproar he causes. If there are consequences for his actions, Trump does not seem to feel their burden personally. The Republican tax bill appears on track for passage, putting the president on the cusp of his first major legislative achievement, which actually is no achievement, because even though I was kind of defending what Scott was saying to be true, the bill itself is just awful. I mean, it's better than nothing, but it doesn't reform anything. It's supposed to be a reform bill, and it does help just corporations, which I think corporations should be the last group to be helped. It should basically lower the middle class and lower everybody. It raises some people's. It gets rid of certain deductions, which basically, they give you some money back, but then they add it here, so you're really not getting any deduction. And some people will. It's kind of like a throw it all around and grab some of it back, and where it lands, there it goes. Anyway, Trump himself remains the highest profile man accused of sexual improprieties to keep his job with no repercussions. Well, you can't really. Someone asked, why don't they get rid of the politicians? Well, you can't if it's something from their past. Only current crimes and misdemeanors. Now, I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that's it. While on the job, then you can be impeached, or you can have a recall in some areas, but it depends on what area you live in. Let's see. In some cases, maybe the state can recall them in some format and have a special election. I'm not sure. And I know sometimes the Congress can remove people from office, even though I think that kind of goes against what the people want. Even though the people can be wrong, but with voting, I don't know. It's a tricky subject there. But anyway, the whole thing with let's see, the senator, they're talking about is Senator Elizabeth Warren. She says that she's part, I can't remember which Indian tribe because it's been so long ago since when she claimed to be, but she claimed to be Native American Indian and a particular tribe, and she used that to get into college for discounts and to get all sorts of scholarships and stuff like that. And she doesn't look Indian, but that doesn't mean anything. I know plenty of people who are half Indian, and where I live, they're people that are part Black, part Indian. They probably call themselves Black Indians. And then there are people that consider themselves white Indians, and then there are people that just consider themselves Indians. And out here, yes, in Virginia, they call themselves Indians. They're not offended by that, whether they call themselves that or you call them that. They prefer that term, Indians, anyway. So he was mocking her, basically saying, "You're not Indian." But we don't know. But what she should do, if she really wants to prove it, unless she knows she's lying, she should take one of those DNA tests so she could say, "Look, here's the evidence. I'm Native." But anyway, that would all go away. But what I thought was really bad, and I don't think this was done on purpose. It could have been. I don't know. Trump seems to not care who he ticks off, and not just, sometimes that's a good thing. Like, you don't care if you tick off the jerks, but sometimes he doesn't seem to care if he ticks off good people. But I think it was an oversight. They did the ceremony with the Native American soldiers. They did the ceremony in front of a portrait of Andrew Jackson, Trail of Tears. He's kind of like, to Native American Indians, he's like Hitler is to Jews. I mean, it's not a good thing. But anyway, so the story just kind of goes on about that. And then, of course, there's Jared Kushner, met with special counsel about Flynn. So who knows what will come out of that. Oh, so much of this stuff with the websites. Jared Kushner met earlier this month with special counsel Robert Mueller's team as part of the investigation into Russia's meddling in the election, according to two people familiar with the meeting. Mueller's team especially asked Kushner about former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, who was under investigation by the special counsel. Two sources said. Flynn was the dominant topic of the conversation, one of the sources said. Mr. Kushner has voluntarily cooperated with all relevant inquiries and will continue to do so, A. Lowell, Kushner's lawyer, told CNN. Conversation lasted less than 90 minutes. One person familiar with the meeting said, adding that Mueller's team asked Kushner to clear up some questions he was asked by lawyers and details that emerged through media reports. One source said the nature of this conversation was principally to make sure Kushner did not have information that exonerates Flynn. And go on to the next story. I wanted to read quite a few of these tonight. House Democrats' division erupts as sexual harassment issue heats up, threatens members. This is USA Today. Let's see. Divisions are emerging among House Democrats who want to show their constituents that they, like the private sector, are taking sexual harassment allegations seriously without stampeding to support proposals that could cause unintended policy and political consequences. Those tensions emerged Tuesday night during a Democratic caucus meeting in which Representative Louis Frankel, Democrat Florida, said proposals under consideration, including requiring members to dip into their personal funds to pay settlements to staffers who raise sexual harassment allegations, could wind up hurting victims' ability to get compensated. According to two lawmakers who attended the small meeting in House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi's conference room, Frankel specifically questioned a proposal intended to make more transparent settlements involving victims of sexual harassment and to disallow members of Congress to compensate victims of harassment with U.S. Treasury funds. See, here's the thing. So far, we found out about basically what I would call a slush fund, that when people were sexually harassed, this fund would pay them off so they would not say anything. What? Our government's covering up sexual harassment and paying people off? I would say that's illegal. But anyway, so they're saying, oh, no. Well, the victims might not get compensated if the member has to pay it themselves. So in other words, you're saying keep taking out of tax money? Why should we have to pay for this? We're the American people. This is our money, not the government's money. If you think of it as the government's money, then sure, let the government pay it. but it's our money. The government takes it. They take too much of it. And I believe in some cases they take it illegally. And in other cases, I just don't think it was the intention of the founders to have the type of tax system we have here. They also tax income, which income, they say it's income, but actually they tax labor because you're trading your labor for something else. Income, by definition, in Black's law dictionary is profit. So the income tax is only supposed to tax profit, not what you go make. You're not making profit when you go work at McDonald's or you go work at Sears or you work at, a tech company, wherever. That's not profit. So anyway, I think what they ought to do is they ought to maybe make them get insurance where, not sexual harassment insurance, but just some kind of insurance, but I guess nobody would insure them, but something that if something happens, some kind of neglect, some kind of issue, something that harms somebody, that you could go ahead and pay that. I don't know, but not out of tax dollars. A bill introduced by Representative Jackie Spear, Democrat, California, and others earlier this month would require that if there is a settlement, the name of the office where the incident occurred and the amount would be posted on a public website. The accuser and the harasser would not be named. Then how do we know it's legit? I mean, would the accuser be known to the rep? I mean, some would say, well, the rep already knows who they are because they did that. Well, what if they didn't do anything? What if they're innocent and then there's an accuser? I mean, this is getting very slippery, man. People need to know their accusers. And I think we need to know their accusers if tax dollars are involved. But at the same time, we want to protect the accuser and the harassed. So it's kind of hard, but if someone accuses you, you have to know who they are. And if we're going to pay their dollars, then there has to be something where we just make sure these people aren't getting paid for false accusations. The American people do not want to pay for Congress's inability to keep our hands to ourselves, said Speer. They want accountability and transparency, and they want it now. I agree with that. Anyway, launch of new missile increases pressure on U.S. policymakers to confront North Korean threat. There's the big Kim Jong-un. Pyongyang's launch of a new long-range missile this week deepens a chief foreign policy dilemma for the Trump administration, putting the threat of North Korean nuclear strike closer than ever before without revealing appealing solutions for American policymakers. We already kind of know most of that. But anyway, those are the stories for today, the day of November 29th, 2017. And you are watching the Libertas Press YouTube channel. I'm Kirby Harris, reporting the truth and common sense opinion. Just want to say, hope you enjoyed this evening's show, and God bless, and see you next time.